The ground trembles long before the machine comes into view. A low metallic rumble rolls across the valley, growing louder with each passing second, until the massive silhouette of the Schwerer Gustav emerges through a curtain of steam and smoke. Twin locomotives strain at the front, their engines roaring under impossible weight, while thick clouds of white vapor hiss into the cold air. Steel wheels grind against reinforced tracks, producing a deafening screech that echoes off distant hills. Soldiers line both sides of the railway, their conversations fading into stunned silence as the enormous gun inches forward. The scale is almost incomprehensible. The barrel stretches endlessly, supported by a complex lattice of girders and platforms that seem more like a moving fortress than a weapon. Men standing nearby appear insignificant, reduced to tiny figures beside towering wheels taller than houses. Officers bark sharp commands, their voices barely cutting through the mechanical thunder, directing crews to guide the giant into its exact position. Flags snap in the wind, and the sky above hangs heavy with dark clouds, as if mirroring the weight of what has arrived. As the Gustav finally slows, the grinding of metal deepens into a heavy, reluctant halt. The last echoes of motion fade, replaced by the hiss of cooling engines and the faint clatter of settling steel. For a moment, an eerie stillness takes over. Soldiers stare upward, some in awe, others with unease, realizing they are standing beside something far beyond ordinary warfare, a machine built not just to fight, but to dominate. The work begins before dawn, under a sky still dim and heavy with mist. Floodlights cast harsh beams across the steel framework as crews swarm around the partially assembled Schwerer Gustav. The air is filled with the clanking of tools, the grinding of metal, and the constant shouts of engineers coordinating every movement. Massive cranes loom overhead, their cables straining as they lift enormous sections of the barrel into place. Each piece swings slowly through the air, guided by teams of men pulling ropes and signaling with urgent gestures. Boots sink into mud as workers rush back and forth, carrying equipment, tightening bolts, and checking alignments with intense focus. The bolts themselves are monstrous, thick as a man's wrist, and require multiple hands just to secure them. Sparks burst from welding torches, briefly illuminating tired faces smeared with grease and sweat. Officers stand nearby with maps and blueprints spread across makeshift tables, pointing, arguing, and recalculating measurements to ensure absolute precision. Every movement feels critical. A slight misalignment could delay everything, or worse, render the weapon useless. The pressure is constant, hanging over the site like the low clouds above. Even as fatigue sets in, no one slows down. Orders keep coming, louder and sharper, pushing the crews forward. The rising sun barely cuts through the haze, revealing a structure that grows larger with each passing hour, steel upon steel, forming something almost unreal. By midday, the outline of the giant gun becomes clearer, towering above the men who built it piece by piece. Yet there is no sense of completion, only urgency. The machine is not just being assembled, it is being forced into existence, driven by the relentless demand for power and precision. The massive shell arrives with a slow, deliberate rumble, carried on a reinforced rail cart that creaks under its extraordinary weight. Even before it comes fully into view, its presence is felt, a looming, silent force of destruction inching closer to the waiting Schwerer Gustav. When it finally stops, the crew gathers around it, their movements careful, almost reverent. The shell towers over them, its smooth steel surface cold and unyielding, a stark reminder of the power it holds. Commands are given in low, precise tones. No one rushes. Every step must be exact. Thick chains are secured, hooks locked into place, and the loading mechanism is prepared with a deep mechanical groan. The crane begins its lift, cables tightening as the shell slowly rises from the cart. For a moment, it hangs suspended in the air, swaying slightly, and every man instinctively holds his breath. Even the smallest shift feels dangerous, as if the entire operation balances on a knife's edge. Guiding ropes are pulled taut as crew members carefully adjust the shell's position, aligning it with the open breech. Their boots scrape against steel platforms, hands gripping tightly despite sweat and tension. The machinery groans louder as the shell inches forward, metal against metal, producing a deep, echoing sound that resonates through the structure. Faces are tense, eyes locked on the movement, knowing there is no room for error. At last, the shell slides into place with a heavy, final motion. A deep, metallic click follows, echoing like a signal that something irreversible has begun. For a brief moment, everything falls silent. The men step back, exchanging glances, some filled with pride, others with quiet unease, as the weapon now stands fully loaded, waiting only for the command to unleash its devastating force. A tense silence settles over the position as the final command is prepared. The crew stands at their stations around the Schwerer Gustav, each man rigid, eyes fixed on gauges, levers, and the distant horizon. The wind seems to fade, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Orders are passed down in sharp, controlled voices, each one acknowledged instantly. Hands tighten on controls, boots brace against the steel platforms, and hearts pound in anticipation of what is about to happen. Then the command is given. For a split second, nothing happens, just a suspended moment of absolute stillness. And then, with a violent, thunderous force, the gun fires. The explosion erupts from the barrel in a blinding flash of fire and smoke, tearing through the silence with a deafening roar. The ground convulses beneath the crew, a shockwave blasting outward, rattling every bolt and beam of the massive structure. Some soldiers stagger, others instinctively duck, as the sheer power of the blast surges through their bodies. A dense cloud of smoke billows outward, swallowing the gun in a churning mass of gray and black. The sound rolls across the landscape like a never-ending storm, echoing off distant hills and returning in low, ominous rumbles. Birds burst from nearby trees, scattering wildly into the sky, while loose debris trembles and falls from surrounding structures. As the smoke slowly begins to clear, the barrel remains steady, almost unmoved, as if unfazed by the immense force it has just released. The crew regains their footing, breathing heavily, ears ringing, their faces marked by a mix of awe and disbelief. They have just witnessed something few could ever imagine, not just a weapon firing, but a demonstration of overwhelming, almost unimaginable power unleashed in a single moment. Miles away, the shell descends with unstoppable force, cutting through the sky in silence before impact. There is no warning at the target, only a sudden, blinding flash as it strikes. The explosion erupts with overwhelming violence, tearing apart earth and stone in an instant. A towering column of fire and debris surges upward, followed by a shockwave that ripples across the landscape, flattening structures and sending dust and fragments flying in all directions. The ground itself seems to split open, leaving behind a massive crater that smolders with heat and destruction. Back at the firing position, the crew of the Schwerer Gustav watches from a distance, some through binoculars, others simply staring toward the horizon. The echo of the blast arrives seconds later, a deep, rolling thunder that confirms the strike. A few soldiers let out quiet cheers, their voices uncertain, while others remain still, absorbing the reality of what they have unleashed. There is no immediate celebration, only a heavy silence that settles over the men. Smoke continues to rise far in the distance, forming a dark scar against the sky. Officers exchange brief nods, already thinking ahead to calculations, adjustments, and the next target. Around them, the massive gun stands motionless once more, its towering frame now calm, almost indifferent. The metal creaks softly as it cools, a faint reminder of the immense force it has just released. The crew begins to move again, slowly at first, returning to their duties with mechanical precision. Yet something is changed. The awe remains, but it is now mixed with a deeper understanding, a realization of the scale of destruction they are capable of delivering. The giant weapon waits in silence, ready to repeat the process, its presence looming like a quiet, unspoken threat over everything around it.